You didn't wake up today and decide to change. It already happened. The shift didn't ask for permission. It didn't wait for the right moment. It didn't need a big event to trigger it. It started quietly, in the background of your normal life, while everything still looked the same on the surface. That's why it feels strange. Because nothing around you is forcing you to change, but something inside you is refusing to stay the same. You feel it in the smallest moments. You're about to say something honest, then you pause. Not because you don't know what to say, but because you're suddenly aware of how real it is. You follow your routine, the same one you've repeated for months or years, but now it feels like you're watching yourself do it instead of just doing it. Even your reactions feel different. You respond, and then you immediately notice the pattern behind your response. That never used to happen. Before, everything flowed automatically. You didn't question every action. You didn't observe every reaction. You were inside the experience. Now, you're slightly outside it. And once that shift happens, everything changes. You might try to convince yourself that you're just overthinking, that you're making things more complicated than they need to be, that you should relax and go back to how things were. But you can't, because this isn't overthinking, it's pattern recognition. You're seeing how predictable your behavior has been, how certain situations trigger the same responses, how your decisions follow familiar routes even when you think you're choosing freely. For example, you walk into a conversation, and before you even speak, you already know how you're going to adjust your tone. You already know which parts of your opinion you'll hold back. You already know how you'll present yourself to keep things smooth. That's not personality. That's conditioning. And now you're seeing it while it's happening. And once you see a pattern in real time, you lose the ability to call it just who you are. This is where the astrology part actually matters. Because this isn't random timing. Taurus energy doesn't create chaos. It creates exposure. It brings attention to what is stable, but also to what is stuck. Your routines, your habits, your comfort zone, the systems you've built your life on. And here's the truth most people ignore. Stability and stagnation can look exactly the same. From the outside, both look calm, both look consistent, both look fine. But internally, one is aligned. The other is just repeated. And right now, you're starting to feel that difference. You wake up, follow your routine, do what you always do, but something feels slightly off. Not enough to break everything, just enough to make you aware that you're repeating something that no longer fully fits. That's Taurus doing its job, not breaking your life, revealing it. There's a very specific stage in awareness where this happens. Everything still exists the same way, but your connection to it weakens. You go through your day, but you're not fully inside it anymore. Part of you is watching, and that creates distance. Not physical distance, psychological distance. You start noticing repetition everywhere. The same conversations, the same emotional reactions, the same cycles playing out in slightly different forms. And once you see repetition clearly, you stop feeling free inside it. That's why normal starts feeling wrong. Not because it changed, because you saw it. It feels like you're losing interest in things, in people, in routines, in the way you used to think. But that's not what's happening. You're losing illusion. You're seeing things without the emotional filter that used to amplify them, without the attachment that made everything feel more meaningful than it actually was. Think about it. There are conversations you used to enjoy, but now you can predict them before they even happen. There are habits you used to rely on, but now you see how automatic they are. There are people you used to connect with, but now you notice the patterns in how they communicate, how they react, how they stay the same. And once you see that clearly, the emotional attachment weakens. Not because you don't care, because you understand. This is where the tension comes from. Because once awareness reaches this level, you can't go back. You can try. You can distract yourself, scroll, stay busy, follow the same routine, and pretend everything feels the same. But it doesn't, because now you know. You know when you're repeating a pattern instead of choosing. You know when you're holding back instead of being real. You know when you're staying comfortable instead of being aligned. And that knowing creates pressure, not external pressure, internal. Because awareness demands alignment. This feeling can easily be misunderstood. It feels intense. It feels uncomfortable. It makes you hesitate. So the mind labels it as fear. But look at its direction. Fear tells you to stay where you are. This feeling doesn't. It pushes you forward. It keeps showing you the gap between your awareness and your actions. It keeps reminding you where you're not aligned. It keeps bringing your attention back to the same points you've been avoiding. That's not fear. That's pressure. Pressure to act in a way that matches what you already understand. You think something is missing, that you need more confidence, more clarity, more readiness. But that's not the problem. The problem is restriction. You've been holding yourself back in ways that have become so normal you barely notice them anymore. It's not always obvious. It's subtle. It's in the pauses before you speak. The second guessing before you act. The quiet adjustments you make just to fit the moment, just to avoid friction, just to keep things smooth. You've learned how to read the room. You've learned how to adapt. You've learned how to present a version of yourself that feels acceptable, predictable, manageable. And at first that felt like control. It felt like intelligence. It felt like maturity. But over time, it became limitation. You started filtering your thoughts before they even had a chance to fully form. You began shaping your words not based on what was true, but based on what would land safely. You reduced your presence in spaces where you could have expanded, simply because expansion felt uncertain. Not dangerous, just unfamiliar. And unfamiliar has a way of feeling like risk, even when it's exactly what you need. So you stayed where things made sense. You stayed where you knew how to operate. You stayed where your identity felt stable. But stability can become a cage when it's built on suppression. Because every time you held something back, every time you chose silence over honesty, every time you adjusted your energy to match others instead of expressing your own, you created a gap between who you are and how you show up. And at first, that gap is easy to ignore. It doesn't feel urgent. It doesn't disrupt your life immediately. But it builds, slowly, quietly, until one day you start feeling it. Not as a clear thought, but as a pressure. A subtle discomfort that you can't fully explain. A feeling that something isn't aligned, that something is off. And you try to fix it the way you've been taught to fix everything. By adding more confidence, more preparation, more clarity. You tell yourself, I just need to figure things out. I just need to be more sure. I just need to wait until I'm ready. But readiness never fully arrives when restriction is still in place. Because the issue was never a lack of something. It was the presence of something. Restriction. And now, that's breaking. Not loudly, not all at once, but you can feel it. There's a shift happening inside you. A shift in awareness. You're starting to notice things you used to ignore. You're becoming aware of how often you hold back, how often you dilute your thoughts, how often you step away from your own instinct just to maintain comfort. And that awareness is uncomfortable. Because once you see it, you can't unsee it. And now there's tension. Not outside, inside. A tension between the version of you that has learned to stay controlled and the version of you that wants to expand. And that expansion doesn't feel clean. It doesn't feel perfectly planned. It feels messy, unpredictable, raw, because it's not constructed. It's real. And real expression doesn't follow scripts. It doesn't wait for perfect timing. It doesn't ask for permission. It moves. And that's what's starting to happen. Not because you forced it, but because your awareness is stronger than your filter. You're beginning to notice the exact moments where you would normally shrink. And instead of automatically following that pattern, you hesitate. You feel the urge to respond differently, to speak a little more honestly, to act a little more directly, to show up a little more fully. And even if you don't always follow through, that moment of awareness matters. Because that's where change begins. Not in action, in recognition, in seeing clearly what you've been doing, and realizing you don't want to keep doing it. Because the version of you you're trying to become already exists. It's not something you have to build from scratch. It's not something you need to earn. It's something you've already experienced. In moments. Brief, but powerful. Moments where you didn't overthink, where you didn't filter, where you didn't adjust yourself to fit expectations, you just responded. Naturally, honestly, directly. And in those moments, you felt different. Not because you became someone else, but because you stopped holding yourself back. And that feeling stayed with you, even after the moment passed. Because it felt real. More real than the controlled version you've been maintaining. And that's what's been pulling at you. Not a lack of confidence. Not confusion. Not uncertainty. Recognition. Recognition of what it feels like to be aligned. To be in sync with yourself. To move without that constant internal resistance. And once you've felt that, even briefly, it's hard to go back to full restriction without noticing the difference. That's why things feel different now. That's why the old patterns feel heavier. That's why staying the same doesn't feel as comfortable as it used to. Because your awareness has expanded. And awareness changes everything. It doesn't force you to act immediately, but it makes it impossible to stay unconscious. You begin to catch yourself, mid-pattern, mid-reaction, mid-adjustment. You start to see the exact moment where you're about to shrink. And that moment, that small pause, is where everything shifts. Because now you have a choice. Not a perfect one, not an easy one, but a real one. Do you continue the pattern, or do you interrupt it? Do you default to what's familiar, or do you explore what's true? And at first, that choice feels uncomfortable, because you're stepping outside of what you've practiced, outside of what you've reinforced over time. But that discomfort isn't a sign you're doing something wrong. It's a sign you're doing something different. And different is exactly what breaks restriction. You don't need to suddenly become fearless. You don't need to completely transform overnight. You don't need to eliminate every hesitation. You just need to stop automatically obeying it. Because hesitation will still be there. Doubt will still show up. The voice that questions you, that tries to pull you back into safety, that doesn't disappear instantly. But it doesn't have to control you anymore. Not when you can see it. Not when you recognize it. Not when you understand that it's just a pattern, not a truth. And this is where things start to change in a deeper way. Not externally, internally. Your relationship with yourself begins to shift. You stop viewing your natural expression as something risky. You stop treating your instincts as something unreliable. You start trusting the moments where you feel clear, even if they don't make complete logical sense yet. Because clarity doesn't always come as a fully formed plan. Sometimes it comes as a feeling, a knowing, a quiet certainty that doesn't need explanation. And when you follow that, even in small ways, you start reinforcing a different pattern. A pattern of expression instead of suppression. A pattern of alignment instead of adjustment. And slowly, that becomes your new normal. Not because you forced it, but because you allowed it. Allowed yourself to speak when you would have stayed quiet. Allowed yourself to act when you would have waited. Allowed yourself to be seen in ways you used to avoid. And the more you do that, the less heavy everything feels. Because you're no longer carrying the constant weight of holding yourself back. You're no longer managing every detail of how you come across. You're no longer filtering every thought before it becomes action. You're just moving, naturally. And that movement creates momentum. Not dramatic, not overwhelming, but consistent, real. And that's what builds change that lasts. Not intensity, consistency. The kind that comes from alignment. The kind that doesn't require constant effort. Because it's not something you're trying to maintain, it's something you're returning to. Returning to yourself. The version of you that was always there. The version of you that didn't need to be constructed. The version of you that didn't rely on perfection to exist. And the more you reconnect with that, the less appealing the restricted version becomes. Not because it's wrong, but because it's incomplete. It's a smaller version of what you're capable of. And now, you can see that. Clearly. So this isn't about becoming someone new. It's about removing what's been in the way. Layer by layer, pattern by pattern, until what's left is real. And that process doesn't happen all at once. It unfolds through awareness, through small decisions, through moments where you choose truth over comfort. And those moments matter more than you think, because they're not isolated. They build on each other. They create a new direction, a new way of operating, a new sense of self that isn't based on control, but on clarity. And that clarity doesn't come from thinking more. It comes from holding back less, from allowing yourself to experience what happens when you stop restricting your expression, when you stop managing every outcome, when you stop trying to guarantee comfort. Because life doesn't expand through control. It expands through participation, through engagement, through presence. And presence requires honesty, not perfection, not certainty, just honesty. With yourself, with your actions, with the way you show up. And the more honest you become, the more aligned you feel. The more aligned you feel, the less you need to force anything. Because things begin to flow naturally, not effortlessly, but authentically. And that's what you've been missing. Not confidence, not clarity, not readiness. Authenticity without restriction. And now that you're aware of it, now that you can feel the difference, now that you can see the patterns, you're already in the process of changing. Even if it doesn't look dramatic yet. Even if it doesn't feel complete yet. Even if you're still navigating moments of hesitation. Because awareness is the beginning. And once it begins, it doesn't go backwards. It only deepens. So the question isn't, do you have what it takes? The question is, are you willing to stop holding it back? Because it's already there. You've already seen it. You've already felt it. Those moments weren't random. They were real. And they're still available to you. Not in the future. Not when everything is perfect. Right now. In the next decision you make. In the next moment you respond. In the next choice between staying controlled or being real. That's where it lives. That's where everything starts to shift. Not outside, inside. This isn't about something that's coming. It already happened. The awareness is already there. The clarity is already there. The disconnect is already there. Now the only question is, what do you do with it? Because you can keep repeating the same patterns while knowing they don't align. Or You can start moving differently, even if it feels unfamiliar. And that's the real shift. Not becoming someone new, but finally acting like the person you already know you are.